I'm sure everyone here can recall the devastating wildfires that took place in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest last summer. Those fires sent up a massive plume of toxic smoke that drifted across the entire continent, even to far-flung places like this remote campsite in northern Vermont. I'd like to impress upon you just a few things today. Climate change is a health emergency. Engagement of health professionals like us is going to be critical in this fight. And it's very easy to advocate for policy action. So just a few weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its latest report on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. That report makes it clear that when we view this crisis from purely a human lens, this is a massive public health crisis. The report paints a stark picture of a world already suffering from human health consequences, including water and food scarcity, shifting distributions of infectious diseases, heat-related illnesses, damage to key economic sectors. The list goes on and on. Climate scientists also warn that the window for action is closing rapidly. So why is this suddenly so urgent? Well, it's urgent because studies have shown that the impacts of climate change will be far greater for every fraction of a degree. So the impacts at 1.5 degrees Celsius will be much less than those at 2.0 degrees Celsius. At the Climate Summit last November, it was also agreed upon that it is still possible to forestall the worst scenarios. The clean energy transition is actually already happening, but our leaders are not acting quickly enough. We need to move faster. So what does it have to do with radiology? Why am I talking about this at a radiology conference? Well, many of us believe that a crisis of this magnitude deserves a response from all sectors of the economy. And as healthcare professionals, we are uniquely positioned to influence other people to act. The organization Healthcare Without Harm phrases it perfectly. As the only sector with healing as its mission, healthcare has an opportunity to use its ethical, economic, and political influence to be a leader in climate solutions. Health and well-being are things that all people want for their loved ones, themselves, their friends, their families. This is a message that can cut through political partisanship and drive political action. And who better to speak about the health impacts of climate change than health professionals like us? Physicians like us have been catalysts and essential advocates on major public health crises in the past. The nuclear crisis, for example, the organization Physicians for Social Responsibility was instrumental in pushing for a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty. Physicians were major drivers in the fight against big tobacco. And the organization Healthcare Without Harm led the successful fight to eliminate mercury-based devices from the healthcare industry. There's precedent for successful global action on environmental campaigns. The Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer was ratified by every country on Earth and is regarded as the most successful environmental campaign in all of history. By phasing out ozone-depleting emissions, in the US alone, the treaty prevented an estimated 1.6 million skin cancer deaths, avoided 45 million cataracts, reduced skin cancer incidence by 280 million, and prevented severe damage to many of the food crops we rely upon. Radiologists are strongly engaged in the struggle for health equity. When we talk about health equity, it's critical that we acknowledge climate change as the severe threat multiplier that it is for vulnerable populations who are already bearing the brunt of its worst impacts due to their increased susceptibility, limited resources to adapt, and increased exposure to the risks of climate change. So what can we do? Well, by now, you're probably familiar with the huge impact of the healthcare sector on greenhouse gas emissions and the contributions of radiology. And you probably also know some of the things that you can do in your own departments and in your healthcare systems to try and mitigate the impacts. There are several things you can do to help immediately, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about those. For example, you can join our network. You can join any one of a number of organizations: Radiologists for a Sustainable Future, Healthcare Without Harm, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Citizens Climate Lobby Health Action Team. There are numerous organizations that provide tremendous resources for political advocacy. Recently, several of these organizations engaged in different advocacy activities that involve sending letters to leaders at the international, national, and regional and state levels urging action on climate change. Altogether, there were many, many thousands of signatories from the healthcare sector. Another thing that we can do is engage with the traditional media. We can write letters to the editor, we can write commentaries, op-eds. It's very easy to get published in local media, and that's a very powerful tool to reach our elected representatives. We can engage people on social media for those of us who do social media. So I hope I've convinced you all that climate change is a health emergency. It's not too late to act. And the most powerful thing that we can do as health professionals is to just speak up and show up. Thank you for listening.